You've done the hard work, dug deep, faced yourself, tried to change. You've extended the olive branch, the teacup, the handwritten note, and still, silence, resistance, rewrite after rewrite of the same painful script. In Wonderland, doors talk and flowers sing, but sometimes the people we long to connect with the most, build walls too high for even magic to climb. This series is for those moments when your vulnerability is met with rolled eyes, when your growth is seen as betrayal, and when trying to reconnect feels like shouting through a hedge maze. You're not imagining it, you're not too much, and no, you don't owe anyone a version of yourself that shrinks just to fit inside their comfort zone. This is the wall and the Wonderland, a journey into what it means to seek closeness, and what it costs when others refuse to meet you halfway.
There's something disorienting about walking into a conversation hoping for clarity, only to end up more lost than when you began. You think you're talking about one thing, but suddenly you're in a completely different part of the story. The topic changes, the mood shifts, the meaning blurs. It's like being dropped into a hedge maze without a map, just trying to find a way through. Some families don't build walls with anger or silence. They build mazes with confusion, dodging directness, twisting timelines, speaking in circles until closeness becomes impossible. And it's not always because they don't care. Sometimes they simply don't know how to be close without feeling unsafe. Vulnerability has never been modeled, so instead of open doors, you get riddles. In this episode, we're exploring the emotional maze, the ways families use confusion, whether through vague answers, subject changes, over-explaining, or rewriting history, as a defense against intimacy, and more importantly, what it feels like to be the one reaching for connection, only to find yourself walking in circles. They don't slam the door. They don't tell you no. Instead, they keep moving the path just when you think you've found the way forward. In Wonderland, this kind of chaos isn't unfamiliar. The white rabbit is always rushing off, too busy, too distracted to stop and have a real moment. The Cheshire cat grins and disappears mid-conversation, leaving you with a question you didn't know you were asking. And the caterpillar, he answers questions with more questions, riddles, puzzles, and smoke. That's the energy we're talking about today. Not open conflict, but a kind of emotional dodge. Confusion that doesn't always look like resistance, but feels like a never-ending loop. In families, it might sound like this. You try to talk about something that hurt you, and suddenly the conversation shifts. Well, what about that time you messed up? You bring up a memory that impacted you, and they said, that never happened, or you're remembering it wrong. You ask for an honest answer, and you get a vague, roundabout response that somehow says a lot without really saying anything. Or you're in the middle of something real and vulnerable, and they change the subject entirely. Let's not talk about the past. Have you eaten today? It's not loud, it's not obvious, but it is effective at keeping you on the outside, at protecting their comfort, even if it means abandoning the conversation halfway through. Sometimes it feels like trying to follow someone through fog. You reach for understanding and deflection. You offer a piece of your heart and get a riddle in return. You might start to wonder if you're just asking too much, if the connection you crave is unreasonable, if you're too emotional, too sensitive, or too needy. This kind of emotional confusion is dizzying. You think you're crazy for needing clarity. You doubt your memory. You feel like you're constantly trying to catch up to a conversation that keeps changing shape. And beneath all that, loneliness. The kind that doesn't come from being alone, but from being surrounded by people who never really let you in. Confusion like this doesn't just frustrate, it isolates. It erodes your ability to trust your own perspective. And over time, it teaches you that closeness might always come with a cost. Silence, dismissal, or feeling like you're the one who got it wrong. But here's the truth. Wanting clarity isn't too much. Wanting to be heard isn't wrong. It's human. And just because your family built a maze doesn't mean you have to stay lost in it. It's easy to take confusion personally, especially when it happens over and over again. You start to wonder, why won't they just talk to me like I'm a person? Why can't we ever have a real conversation? But often, the confusion isn't about you. It's about them, their fear, their wiring, their past. It's emotional self-protection dressed up as conversation. For some people, closeness feels risky. Being seen too clearly, that's terrifying. Vulnerability, that's dangerous. And if they grew up in a home where mistakes led to punishment, where emotions weren't safe, or where perfection was the only way to earn love, then directness might feel like a threat. Getting too close means being exposed, so instead they keep things cloudy. Sometimes it's about avoiding blame. If the conversation never lands on anything solid, then no one truly is responsible. If they can keep things vague, they don't have to sit with guilt or admit to hurting you or face their own limitations. The maze becomes a shield. And often, these patterns don't start with them. They're intergenerational, hand-me-downs, coping mechanisms passed down like old teacups and dusty furniture. Maybe your mom avoids hard conversations because her mother shut her down every time she cried. Maybe your dad jokes his way through serious moments because his father never showed emotion. Maybe your aunt gaslights without realizing it because that's how her family survived conflict, by rewriting the story to make it less painful. Some families, especially in certain cultures or generations, were taught that silence is strength, that talking about emotions is self-indulgent, that clarity is confrontation. So what you're facing isn't just one person's behavior, it's a legacy. And then there's control. When someone feels emotionally out of control, the easiest way to reclaim power is to steer the conversation. If they can confuse you, redirect you, or spin the story just enough, they stay in charge. They don't have to feel overwhelmed. They don't have to feel vulnerable. They just have to keep moving the pieces on the board. But here's the nuance. This doesn't mean that they're being malicious. Sometimes, yes, people do manipulate on purpose. But a lot of the time, they don't even know that they're doing it. Confusion has become second nature. Vagueness is a survival skill, and clarity, that was never modeled. They don't know how to speak plainly. They don't know how to hold emotional discomfort without escaping it. And they might not even realize the damage that their patterns are causing, because to them, it's just how families talk. So while the maze may feel personal, it often isn't. But that doesn't mean the impact is any less real. Understanding why it happens won't make it hurt less, but it can help you stop blaming yourself for the disconnection. You didn't create the maze. You just walked into it looking for connection. Walking through a maze over and over again, never finding the center, never reaching the end, eventually takes a toll. Especially when the maze isn't made of hedges, but of conversations with people you love. When family communication is chronically confusing, it starts to wear you down from the inside out. At first, you try to keep up. You assume it's just a miscommunication. You didn't say it clearly enough, or maybe you misunderstood. So you try again. You rephrase, you soften, you let things slide. But over time, the pattern sets in. You start doubting your own memory. You second guess what you felt, what you said, what actually happened. You start wondering, did I make that up? Did I blow that out of proportion? Maybe I'm the one that's in the wrong. That confusion doesn't just live in your head. It creeps into your body. It becomes emotional exhaustion. You feel drained after every conversation. You dread bringing up anything. You brace yourself for the twists and turns, the sidesteps, and the story flipping. And worst of all, you start to believe you're the problem. You hear the message even if it's never said outright. You're too sensitive. You're too intense. Why can't you just let things go? So you stop asking. You stop expressing. You shrink your needs until they're small enough not to offend anyone. Then comes the overthinking. You find yourself constantly decoding every interaction. Was that joke a dig? Did they really forget, or were they avoiding it? Did they mean what they said, or was that just a script? The confusion becomes your default setting, always trying to solve a riddle that has no answer. And here's where it hits the hardest. It starts to mess with your sense of who you are. If the people closest to you never reflect that clarity, never offer you emotional steadiness, it's easy to wonder, maybe I really am too much. Maybe I deserve this distance. Maybe I was supposed to get lost. You might become hypervigilant, reading every room like a chessboard, or a people pleaser, keeping the peace at all costs just to avoid the next spiral. Not because you're weak, but because your nervous system has learned closeness comes with confusion, and confusion is dangerous. And so you shapeshift, you adapt, you twist yourself into something more acceptable, more invisible, more easy to manage. But here's the truth. You were never too much. You were just trying to connect in a place that didn't know how to meet you halfway. You were trying to build bridges in a maze designed to keep things just far enough away. And none of that confusion was your fault. When you spend enough time in a confusing emotional maze, it's easy to start believing that there's no way out, but there is. And it begins with noticing the maze for what it is. The first step is naming the pattern. Start paying attention to the moments when clarity suddenly disappears, when the conversation goes in circles, when you're explaining yourself over and over but never seem to land anywhere new. You can gently say to yourself, wait, that felt like a loop instead of a path, or that response just step-sided what I was trying to say. You're not being dramatic, you're recognizing a strategy that's been used, consciously or not, to avoid connection. Once you can name it, you can start grounding yourself in your truth. Confusion thrives in isolation, so don't let it live only in your head. Write down what happened. Journal the conversation after it ends. What was said? How did it make you feel? What got skipped or spun? Seeing it in writing can help you untangle it and reconnect with what you actually know. You can also reality check with trusted people, someone who knows your story, someone who can remind you, no, you're not overreacting. Yeah, that sounded dismissive. Yeah, that did feel like a deflection. Sometimes the most healing thing is simply hearing, that was real. From there comes the harder part, setting boundaries. You might say, I'm willing to talk about this, but not if the story keeps changing. Or, I don't want to keep revisiting this unless we can have a clear conversation. And if the confusion keeps coming, you're allowed to step away. You can say, I'm feeling really disoriented right now, and I need some space. Taking that space isn't petty, it's protective. It's a way of saying, I'm not going to get lost again today. And finally, here's the truth no one really wants to face, especially those of us who grew up trying to fix everything. You can't lead someone out of the maze if they don't want to leave it. You can't logic someone into being emotionally available. You can't decode every riddle, untwist every sentence, rewrite their behavior until it feels like love. Sometimes the healthiest and most freeing choice is to stop trying, to build your life outside the maze, to create clarity in your own relationships, even if your family never does, to stop walking in circles and start building a path forward when grounded in truth, choice, and connection. And no, that doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. You're allowed to stop engaging in confusion just because that's what's familiar. You're allowed to say, I want something different, I deserve something real. Not all who wander in the maze want to be found. Some people feel safer behind the hedges, behind the riddles, behind the fog and half-truths. And while it's heartbreaking to witness that from the outside, especially when it's family, it's not your job to drag them into the light. You spend enough time chasing closeness through confusion. Enough time trying to read between the lines, trying to hold conversation steady when someone keeps turning the floor beneath your feet. It's okay to stop chasing. You deserve clarity. You deserve honesty. You deserve relationships where the path may not be perfect, but it's walkable together. You're not too sensitive. You're not too much. You're not asking for something unreasonable just because you want to feel safe in your connections. You're simply not willing to get lost anymore. Because sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is stop walking, stop explaining, stop twisting yourself into someone easier for them to understand. You don't need to follow their confusion to stay in the relationship. You can choose stillness. You can choose self-trust. You can choose to see the maze for what it is and stop blaming yourself for not being able to solve it. Clarity is not a luxury. It's a right, and you're allowed to build a life where that is the standard, not the exception. And as you step out of today's maze, remember this. You're not lost. You're just learning where to not follow. Until next time, keep unlocking your truth, one curious turn at a time.